Welcome to the apex of sports ownership, the Apex Athletic Collective.
Everybody to episode 33 of Instigate Success. I am Jake Schoen, aka Jakey Muffins. I'm here again to be your host for this week's episode, episode 33. And we just finished up our first regular season with the Instigators. So we'll be going over a lot about that, preview what we got coming up this weekend, as well as talk a little bit about the playoffs and kind of just recap our whole inaugural season. Thank you, everybody, again for joining us. As always, we'll continue to have this. Nice to see you. We got Jason Wright here. Nice to see you here. Happy March as well. We are looking forward to what we got coming up. We had some pretty big news. So this week we're doing something a little bit different. We're doing a scrimmage since we don't have a game scheduled. There's still a couple of teams within the ABA, even within our division, that still have some games coming up this weekend. So that'll get the final standing set as well as the playoffs all in order. While those teams are doing that, we're going to have a scrimmage 5 p.m. this Sunday. We're doing a scrimmage between Dylan and AB. They're going to have their own rosters. We're having some votes already up on our Patreon, and you can pick the team rosters there. But it's a pretty cool event that we're going to do. It's going to be live streamed on our Patreon here as well as YouTube. Being that it's a scrimmage, it's not like an actual game. There's no record keeping per se. So we're actually going to have this streamed for free on our YouTube as well. So hopefully we can get some more people drawn in here for the playoffs. But this stream here, as always, and for the playoffs, always be on the Patreon. So we're hoping to draw some more people in for that. But we have some votes up already for the Sunday's scrimmage. We also have a couple of special things about that. We'll jump into that. So let me see what the current polls are. So our first vote, it looks like, is currently the first vote was which team should Chuck Bloom go to? And then whichever team he goes to, Joe Bird will go to the opposition. As of right now, it's about a 60-40 split with Chuck going to team AB, and that would leave Joe Bird going to team Dylan. So that's where that currently stands. So that's a pretty close one. Second one we've got going on here, not quite as close. It's a pick between Aubrey Patterson. Which team will he go to? Currently, it's 100% he's going to Team Dylan. So that would mean Mike Pugh, he's going to be the other player involved in that pick, would go to Team AB. So that's a pretty big vote right there. I'm surprised that's 100%. A lot of these other ones are a little bit more split. Let's see the third one. That one's pretty close, 60-40. So this is a vote for JoJo Hart, and whichever team he doesn't go to, Jesse Sawyer will be on the other team. As of right now, it's a slight favor for Team AB. He's got 60% compared to Dylan with 40. So that's a close one. That could still be up for grabs if any of our Patreon subscribers here have not voted yet. Be sure to go on our Patreon and get your votes in before Sunday. That one's close, as well as our first one is close. The next one we have was between Chance Fry and Stevie Richmond. The votes for which team Chance should go to. As of right now, it's in favor of Team AB by 80%. So that one also is looking like it's pretty set. And the one I'm really looking forward to seeing was kind of like a little surprise we threw in there. There's an owner showdown in there. My name's not on there, but I can't make it out to the game anyways. Being that it's Sunday at 5, there's just no way logistically I'd be able to pull that off. But we got some real cool news. We got both Frosty and Spacely in this vote. So the vote is for which team our coach Frosty should go to. And right now it's 100% for Team Dylan. So it's looking like he will probably be a part of Team Dylan. And that would leave Spacely to Team AB. I know those two guys have been trash talking about this quite a bit, but it'll be a real fun matchup. Something for all our fans to get excited about. Kind of get to see it, everybody in action. We have a couple guys that aren't going to be able to make it out to the scrimmage. I believe that's from what I remember, V Brown and Lawan aren't going to be able to make it out. But you're going to be able to see pretty much the whole team out there, and get ready for the playoffs. See our guys go up against each other. Maybe see some of the guys that don't play it quite as much as the other guys that are on the court. They'll have a nice opportunity here to showcase their skills, and not only for us to watch here, but when we go into the off season, not that we're going to the off season quite yet, we still have plenty left with this, and as well as the playoffs. We definitely hope to make a deep run, so plenty of games left. But once we do hit that next step of the off season, it'll be a nice little kind of evaluator for fans to see where the players rank, and they can kind of go back and watch this as well as like some of our first matchups when we had the scrimmage in that matchup against the IBL with the Shuckers. See some of the guys that maybe didn't get quite as much playing time when it comes to roster decisions. But this is going to be a really fun event. I'm really looking forward to this. It's definitely going to be fun. I have reached out. Normally, we have our picks on the Control app with FCSE. I have reached out to them. I think we're going to have a couple of picks in this week. Maybe not as many with the stats because I'm not 100% sure if we're really keeping stats. But we're going to see. I think we're going to get at least a vote between Frosty and Spacely. I'll just put that out there. But they'll have bragging rights, whoever can win that vote. But it's going to be a really fun event. Looking forward to it. Again, this is 5 p.m. on Sunday. It'll be here on our Patreon as well as our YouTube. We're really looking forward to it. Scrimmage between two of our top guys, and the second and third player for the Instigators in history. First player was Joe Bird. So these guys have been with us, from the beginning, and we're really looking forward to it. Again, this is scrimmage. Get your picks in if you have not already made your selections for the players, as well as our co-owners for the game on Sunday. Again, we're looking forward to that. We don't have the graphics up yet or the vote up actually yet for the player of the game. Last week we had our final regular season game, but I got a couple graphics here for our potential nominees for player of the game. That game wound up with the Lions walking away with a victory in the final regular season game of the inaugural Hoosier State Instigators season. We traveled out to play the Lions. First two games, the Lions got the best of us. In this third game, they also got the best of us as well. But every time we've played them, it's been a very close game. This one was no different. They wound up winning 100 to 94. Very low scoring, honestly, comparative to the rest of the season for the Instigators. But a lot of defense. And, the Lions are the defending co-champions of the ABA. So I think that kind of set a message not only to the Lions as well as the rest of the ABA, but kind of reinforced what we've been saying throughout the season, that the Instigators, we're really here to compete. We've purposely made our schedule the way we did because we wanted to make sure we had matchups against quality teams. And with this being our third game against the defending co-champions, we're able to stick in there with just about any team. And I think that's going to give us a little bit of an edge when it comes to the playoffs. The playoffs should be starting not this week, but the following week. So 9th and 10th are going to be the play-in games. Still waiting again to see how some of these games wrap up for the rest of the season. Believe there's a couple of teams here in our division that we're still waiting to see exactly how the games fall because of how the seeding will be. Again, I think we put a post out a little bit ago about that, but it looks like the Lions, Kings, and Aces are going to be locked up in the first three seeds. They'll have buys, and the rest of the teams in the division will have the play-in games, which would include us. So the other four teams in the division include ourselves, as well as the Clarksville Phoenix, the Louisville Pros, and the Indiana Legends. And we've played all three of those teams throughout the season. We got the better half against the Clarksville Phoenix in the one matchup that we've had against them. The Louisville Pros we played a few times. They have the better record against us. They won, I believe, two games to the one game that we beat them. And that one game we did beat them was just the past couple of weeks ago. And then the Indiana Legends, we have been able to beat both of the times we've matched up against them. So we've got a couple of potentially favorable matchups depending on how things play out in the final week here in the ABA regular season. Um, I mean, I look at the online stats, I'll be completely honest, aren't 100% always up to date and accurate on their website, as on the ABA website, as well as My Stats Online, which we typically use for our stats. They have us currently in the 4 seed, but they do have the Clarksville Phoenix here listed at 4-5, and I'm fairly certain their record's actually 5-5. But I do know they have another matchup this weekend. I believe it's against the Aces, and I think the Pros play against the Legends. So I think those two teams, the Pros and the Legends, will most likely wind up being the 6 and the 7 seed. However, the Phoenix could jump over us for that 4th seed. So we're waiting to see exactly what happens once it all gets settled out. But we'll keep you guys updated on that once this season concludes for all of the ABA teams and we get an official notice from the league as far as the matchups, the times, and the dates, and even the locations for our games. With that coming up just next week. Anyways, this past week, like I said, we played the Lions. We had a couple of guys here. I actually had a little bit of a hard time deciding. Normally we do 4 players, but we'll get this vote up before our next game. It's not currently up, so this is a little bit of a sneak peek preview. Again, this is exclusive for our Patreon viewers here. You're getting a little bit of a sneak peek. AB always putting up some big numbers, 17 points and 17 boards, as well as 3 assists, double double again. And every week he just puts up some crazy numbers. It's to the point where we're kind of numb to it at this point, where we kind of expect that. But just to see that every week is pretty crazy. Nearly 20 points and nearly 20 rebounds. That's something we have come to expect from him. And his teammate Dylan Ware, again, both of those guys are former Lions players, so they always have a little bit of an extra edge when they match up against the Lions. He nearly had the same points and rebounds, 17 points, 16 rebounds, and 7 assists. So one less rebound, but a few more assists. He's definitely got a strong case here for Player of the Week. And we've got this is a first time guy here on the list, Mike Pugh. So, shout out to him for making this. He was a late addition to the team. He's our most current addition to the team, 15 points, 4 rebounds, and 0 turnovers. So, that's a big stat. He had no turnovers in this past game against the Lions. I believe he was the only player on our team without a turnover. So that definitely helped to his contribution in this week, which once this vote goes up live, it'll be a tough decision between some of our guys here. But shout out to Mike. We're glad to have him on the team. First time here on the Player of the Game nominations. Coming up shortly, probably next week for that vote. Jojo, as always, part of our player of the game nominees. 15 points, 2 steals, and 2 assists. And throughout the season, we've seen JoJo always seems to have a couple of steals or so per game, and that is one of his best assets. Is he's been one of our strongest defensive players, and I'm always surprised with him. He's our shortest guy, but he's always like one of the guys that is involved even when they're down low. He'll get a rebound sometimes, and his intensity on defense has definitely helped the Instigators throughout the season. As always, he is part of this player of the game nomination, as well as our guy Chuck Bloom, the captain of the team. 12 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists. He's always doing everything on the floor. In the past few weeks, he really has kind of stepped up his inside game. He's not quite as tall as AB, but he's been playing like a big body down low, kind of dribbling down there, edging into the inside and pushes his way in to get those layups and tough rebounds. As always, he's put up some good numbers throughout the week. He'll be up there as well for our player of the game nominations. Again, I said I couldn't really narrow it down to quite the 4 that we normally do, so I made 5 graphics. We'll see when that vote goes live. It should be probably next week, but before we play our playoff game, we'll throw that vote up for everybody to get their votes in. We'll have a tough decision here, though. And all of those guys, as well as the guys who weren't listed, definitely were big contributors in that game against the Lions. Always showing the mentality of the Instigators and the toughness of that team when we go up against teams like the Lions. And really, in the second half of the season, the team has really stepped up. And I think we're going to be a very tough team when it comes to the playoffs. Um, I think if the things play out how I see, I think we'll get through the playoffs round or the play-in round of the playoffs, and then we'll have an interesting matchup depending on how things play out. Um, Once we get into the next round of the playoffs, so again, the not this week, but the following week, March 9th and 10th are going to be the play-in games for the tournaments. And just a little bit of a refresher, there's about 150 teams in the ABA. So that is definitely a large number, and that's why we're split into regions as well as divisions within the regions. We are in the central region in the red division within the central region. So our division has 7 teams, and it's a March Madness kind of style bracket or like college basketball type of bracket, if you're familiar with that. So it'll be within our division and then within our region, and it'll keep progressing until eventually it's like a national playoff format. So we'll have to get through the play-ins. Again, we'll get that updated after we get official word from the league following this week's games that'll wrap up the final games of the regular season. But it looks like we'll probably be playing on the 9th and the 10th. So, the 9th, and then if we're able to win on the 9th, we'll be playing on the 10th. But we plan on doing that. So, and then if we can win on the 10th, then we would progress to the following week, and that would be a matchup between one of the top 3 seeds in our division, which at this point would be the Lions, Kings, and Aces. So we'll keep you guys updated on that. But we'll jump into our regular season. So this was our inaugural regular season. Thank you everybody for being a part of this. We would not have been able to accomplish this without everybody that's been involved. Most importantly, all of our fans and subscribers here on the Patreon. We're very appreciative of all the support we've had. I just have this graphic here with our regular season results, but it doesn't show all of the hard work and effort that's went into this regular season. we'll still have plenty to talk about even after we wrap up our whole season. But we really had a bunch of support from everybody. From the logo to the colors to the jerseys, we have had the fans kind of decide that. And again, that is why we encourage you to be a part of our Patreon. And we've been having a lot of votes recently on that. We're really trying to step that up and kind of keep our word. We're having the fans involved as much as we can. But looking into our inaugural regular season, we started out not quite as hot as we would have liked to. The first game, we started off with a loss against the Chicago Rebels, and that was our only matchup against the Rebels. That was a close game, and I was there as well as many of our other co-owners here from the Apex Athletic Collective. But that was a very close game, 115 to 123. Team really rallied in the fourth quarter from what I can recall, and definitely got the fans involved. We had a great turnout for that first game, and kind of signaled the glimmer of hope that we had going into the season, that we all knew the Instigators were a team capable of playing anybody, but we weren't able to come out with the win in that first matchup. However, our second game of the season, we were able to win, and that was one of our largest wins on the season, 152 to 115 against the Southland Saints. And we wound up playing the Saints a little bit later in the season as well. But both of those were our first two home games at the Clinton CRC. And that's been an amazing venue. As always, I'll give them a shout out every time. When I went there for my first game, it was amazing. I've been there a few more times throughout the season, and it's got an amazing feel. It really kind of like just it's like a nostalgic feel for that, old school basketball. Going to the Hoosier State, it's kind of what you expect when you step in to basketball court for a Hoosier State Instigators team. Brick building, and it's just kind of reminds you of everything with the history of basketball. It's an amazing venue. Always great to see everybody come out there. Then we went on a road stretch. We had 4 road games, and might be a little bit difficult to see here on the graphic, but used red for the colors for the scores of the games. But then we played the Lions, the defending champions. That was the first of 3 matchups against the Lions. We were very close in that as well, though. That was an 8-point game. Then we went on the road again to the Aces. I think I was at that game as well. Another 8-point loss. And then we had that matchup against the Pros on the road. I was at that game. That was our only overtime game of the season. So I don't have that signified on there, but that was our first and only overtime game so far in Instigators history. And that was also our first game under 100 points. But that was a close game. I think after that we kind of knew a little bit better when it came to the overtime rules and whatnot. So if we do wind up going into another overtime game, I think we have better chance this time. Then we played the Saints again, and we got our second win on the season. That was a closer matchup, though, and that was on the road. 5-point victory there. Then we went back home for a long home stretch here against the Pros. Another close game. We weren't able to come out with the victory. Then we played the Kings. And the Kings, every time the 2 times we have played the Kings, they have been dominant. That is the one team I will say uh, I would be a little bit worried to play in the playoffs. But our second matchup, we showed we could stick around with them. We started at a little bit of a disadvantage in the first half in that second game, but I'll jump into that in just a minute here once we get to that. Then we played the Legends here, and that was our third win on the season. And we have the forfeit win against the Aces. Last minute cancellation there for a scheduled home game wound up being leading to a victory in our column. However, we never actually played that game. so it goes down as a win. However, it's a win by forfeit. So we didn't actually get to play that game at the Clinton CRC, but we did play the Lions there in the Clinton CRC. That final score is not really indicative of how close that game actually was. Then we went back on the road for a couple more games against the Legends. We were able to get a victory there, improving our record. And I also just want to point out here in that middle part of the season, we did have that coaching change where we went from Matt Patterson to coach Corey Kern, aka Frosty. Again, he'll be suiting up on Sunday at 5 p.m. So be sure to tune in to watch our own Jackie Moon. Basically, he's the founder, owner, and head coach, and now he's a player. So he is basically our version of Jackie Moon. In it's the ABA, so it quite literally is the same league that Jackie Moon played in. So it'd be fun to watch that. But he took over here, I believe, the last game of 2023. So that first matchup against the Lions wound up being his first matchup, but he did start. That was a tough matchup. Then he started with a win, his first win against the Legends, and he got a second win against the Legends. We were later awarded that forfeit win, so that got added to his resume as well. And he was able to finish out the season here on a really hot streak. We were very close against the Kings. Like I mentioned in that second matchup, they're a very dominant team. They've got Cam Mitchell, and every time he plays, he puts up like 50 or so points. So when it comes to the playoffs, that's really going to be, I think, the determining factor as far as how far in the playoffs the Kings go. Is if anybody is able to limit Cam Mitchell. He's just been kind of dominant on the floor when he's played. But we saw in that second half of that game, I believe we actually had the same amount of points as the Kings. So that is something to keep an eye on. And if we match up against the Lions, we've seen the 3 times we played the Lions, we have been very close with them in all 3 matchups. So I think if we can get through these play-in games, it's going to be really close um, in the next round of playoffs. And after the Kings, we played the Phoenix. That was our only matchup against the Phoenix, an in-division opponent here, and we were able to win that. I do know they're a little bit light-handed as far as their roster for that game, so that might not be as indicative of that team's talent when it comes to the playoffs. I think they only had 6 or so players for that game. And we saw that on our own account as well when we played the pros. Our first matchup against the pros, we only had, I think, 6 or 7 players for that game. So sometimes there's just either injuries or people get sick, can't make the trip, and when you're on the road, it's a little bit difficult sometimes. But then we played the pros again, and we got our first win against the pros after that. That was the only game that I was able to witness a victory in person. I think I attended 4 games throughout the season, the regular season. Hopefully, I'm able to make a trip out for the playoffs. But again, I'll have to wait and see. Just like everyone else here, once the official playoff schedule gets set, then I'll make my travel plans, but I do hope to be able to make it out there for the playoffs. And then we wrapped up our season here just this past week against the Lions. Once it's all said and done, we finished our first regular season at 7-9, and very close to pulling off the 500, which would have been awesome to say we were able to break 500 in our inaugural season. I mean, obviously, we wanted to finish with a winning record, but the way we finished out the season, I think that was good enough to show we've got a lot to be thankful for and a lot to look forward to when it comes to the playoffs as well as the upcoming seasons for the Hoosier State Instigators. While we didn't finish with a winning record for the team, our interim coach, Corey Curran, did wind up finishing with a winning record for his head coaching record. So that'll always be in our stats and our historical logs. Is even though the team wasn't able to have a winning record overall, Corey Curran will have a, and my headphones gave out, but they're back now. So yeah, Frosty will have a winning record when it's all said and done for his inaugural season as a head coach, interim head coach. But 7-9, we're happy with that. And if we can get a couple more wins when it comes to the playoffs, then we can throw those in as well for our inaugural season stat keeping, and we could finish with not only breaking even, but a winning record. And if we go on to win everything, I think we'd probably be the first team to do that in their inaugural season. But we're looking forward to that when it comes to the playoffs. Um, oh yeah, we've still got a couple more things here I had. So just a recap for our player of the weeks. I noticed when I was going through this, I think we slacked a little bit and didn't get every week in here for the votes. Um, but like I said, I know we haven't gotten this past game in there yet, but we'll have the vote up for that probably next week. Um, but when I looked at the numbers, I was a little bit surprised here. AB had three, technically four if you want to throw one in there. That one, he had a tie with JoJo. They both had the same number of votes in their, I think it was game 5 of the season. Both of them were tied in votes, but when we did the stream here, JoJo was ahead, so technically we gave JoJo the win on that, which is why he's up at 3. So you could say if we count that for him, you could put AB at 4. Um, but he's still got one more vote here. So if he winds up winning that, he would be the outright winner. Either way, he does still technically, I would say, have the advantage when it comes to total player of the weeks throughout the season. JoJo would be number 2 with the 2 outright wins and the third win by tie. But at the time we checked, he was ahead, so he got that. And he was actually the only player that was also named a player of the week by the players. A little bit different. We had that one week where JoJo was actually named the player of the week by the players. That was our only week when it came to player of the weeks that the fans didn't decide that. Every other week we've had the votes here on Patreon. Chuck, the team captain, has had 2 player of the weeks as well. Throughout the season, he's the only other player here with multiple player of the weeks, which is kind of surprising when you look back at the season. A couple of guys here, you see them every week put up some solid numbers, and just happens, somebody else gets to vote a little bit better on either the score sheet or to the eye test. Aubrey Patterson had that one outstanding game. I think that was against Legends. And he got player of the week for that. Lawan and Dylan, both with 1 player of the week. That's really the number that surprises me, if I'm being quite honest. Dylan, I know, didn't even get the player of the week, I think, until like the past player of the week. Not for the past game, but the week before he won player of the week. So he was the latest addition to the player of the week winner. Um, but he's had solid stats throughout the season, and he's always been a key factor in our wins. Swish had the 1 player of the week, but he has led the team in points, I would say, for the better part of the majority of the games throughout the season. Um, but, as always, we keep this vote for the fans here to decide, and I think that's a pretty good split between the players, because had it just gone by strictly some statistical categories, I don't think we would have had as far as a split. But, when you watch the games, there's sometimes the stats, just don't cover everything. So it's a nice split between the guys. Uh, But AB, I would say, is the de facto winner for our overall player of the weeks. I think he's been on the vote pretty much every week. JoJo's always up there as well as Chuck. Aubrey's been on there a few times. So he had that one win. Lawan is normally right on there for most of the games, as well as Dylan. He did have a couple of games he was out with illness, though, which may have cost him a couple more shots at the player of the week. But all of those guys, congratulations and shout out to all of them for winning the player of the week throughout the season here for the Instigators. Again, we'll have that one more player of the week vote for the past game against the Lions coming up shortly. So we'll have one more vote to add on this tally, as well as when we get to the playoffs, we'll also do the player of the weeks there. So a couple more votes for that. And then we had some stats here. I just pulled stats, from the online stats source for the ABA, which is the same as my stats online. And for some reason, they only had 13 games listed with stats. I do know there was a couple of games we had some issues as far as reporting our stats. So that I'm believing is what led to that. We all had that one game where the camera was out for a little bit, which we weren't able to keep full stat record keeping for that because we go back and watch the record, or we go back and watch the film to get our stats as far as that goes. But I think this is what the league's actually going to look at when it comes to league leaders and whatnot for statistical categories. So I figured we might as well look at these anyways. Um, when it comes to points, though, like I was saying in the player of the weeks, Lawan actually led the team in points. He joined in a game in game two. He came over from the Shuckers. So that first matchup, even though it was a scrimmage against the Shuckers in the IBL, that wound up being one of our most important matchups because we got the guy that lit us up, and he wound up joining our team so he could do the same exact thing throughout the season. So, based off of the stats available, he had 24 and a half points per game. So that's a pretty solid number. I think AB was second. He was a little over 20 points a game, but almost 25 points per game. That's pretty impressive for Lawan. As far as shooting percentage, they don't have like an overall shooting percentage thing. And I mean, honestly, I could go in and do the stats myself, but I haven't. So we're doing shooting percentage for both 2 and 3 pointers. Free throws are a little bit weird because there's a high number of free throws for some players and then a very small percentage of free throws for other players. And some guys I don't think have went to the line. So it's kind of hard to use that as far as like a leader's kind of perspective thing because it's so dispersed on that. But for 2 point shots, Dylan had the best percentage when it came to guys that have taken a decent number of shots, 75% on the year, which is very impressive. Um, 91 of 122. So that's an amazing number. I was kind of surprised he was above AB. If I'm being quite honest, AB is 7 feet tall and he stays under the rim for a lot of his shots. Um, but he does have some times where he tries to get a tip in, and that does technically count as a shot. So if that doesn't fall, that does hurt his shooting percentage. And I did put on there honorable mention to Stevie Richmond because if you do go and include everybody on the team, Stevie does actually lead that category. He was 2 of 2 when it came to his 2 point shots. So he made all of the 2 pointer shots that he took as far as the stats that are available on the My Stats Online portal. So throw that in there. But if we do like a break off of people that shot like 25 plus shots, then Dylan is going to be the leader in that. 3 point percentage, it doesn't matter how many shots you look at. Lawan, Mr. Swish, has that name for a reason. He was our leading 3 point shooter on the season. He shot over 50%, which is very impressive. at any level for 3 pointers. He was 59 of 115. Again, it's not a 100% comprehensive statistics because, like I said, we had some issues in that one game, so we weren't able to keep 100% stats in that game, as well as I think there was some reporting issues um, to the official stat keeping throughout the season. So it's 13 games, not the 16. We did have the one forfeit, so really we're only missing 2 games as far as the stats go. So not that far off, but 51%. That's really impressive. Um, and that, like I said, that includes if you include all the players that shot 3 pointers. Um, we had, I think, one player, I can't remember off the top of my head. I think he shot 2 threes and he made one of them, so he just barely beat out that player. Rebounds, I'm sure anybody could have guessed that AB is going to lead in rebounds. No matter how you look at it, he had 200 total rebounds in the 13 games with stats available. If you break that down, that's over 15 rebounds per game. And if you look at that with his points, he averages a double double per game. And if you break that down into offensive and defensive, he had about a third of them in offensive. So 67 were offensive, which is about 5 a game, and 133 defensive, about 13 a game. Um, but that might not be right. I look at that now and the numbers don't add up. So I'm gonna say I probably had a typo somewhere in there as far as the per game numbers. Let me see. I'll grab a calculator real quick. Uh, let me see. 5 plus 13 is 18. So definitely had a typo there at some point. Yeah, I think that should be 10.2, not a 13.2. When it comes to the defensive rebounds, which should make more sense because yeah, that's what it is. So that should be 10.2, not 13.2. I apologize for that error. But when you look at it, it's a 2/3 to 1/3. So yeah, it should be that anyways. But then we jump to assists, and Dylan really in the second half of the season turned it up as a ball handler and wound up leading the team in assists with 81 total. And that's even with him missing a couple of games throughout the season. That's almost 7.5 assists per game. And like I said, he really wasn't the main ball handler or distributor in the beginning of the season. But ever since our interim coach Frosty has taken over, he has really pushed the ball through Dylan, and he's done an amazing job at that. And that's really helped him in the Player of the Week votes as well. But I do also want to say shout out on the rebounds. I think Chuck was our second leading rebounder. So I'll throw that out there. Our second leading player on assist, I believe, was JoJo. But both of those guys, again, they always put up some solid numbers. As far as steals, it was between those two guys, Chuck and JoJo. Chuck got the slight edge here with 25 total steals in the games that we have stats reported for. That's almost 2 steals a game. I think JoJo was a couple of steals behind him. Averages a little over 1.5 per game. Either way, though, impressive for both of those guys. I've said this a few times, but that's one of the stat categories I feel like is the hardest to do when you're actually on the court playing. Um, because you're gonna get called for a foul majority of the time when you go for a steal. So to be able to pull that off successfully is very difficult. Um, the stat that's difficult for everyone else except for the guy who wound up leading this, AB with blocks, 63 total blocks, and he's leading the whole entire ABA by 13 blocks. So we expect him to be crowned the champion of blocks once the season concludes for the ABA this year in the regular season. That's almost 5 blocks per game. And I know he's had games over 10 blocks. He's had double doubles and triple doubles with double digit blocks. So he has definitely shown that is his area of dominance when it comes to the statistical categories. But pretty cool to say, like in our inaugural season here, that we have, or most likely are going to have, the league leader in any of this statistics, which is going to be AB for blocks. And we had the vote out earlier in this week, just in case you didn't wind up seeing it. We did a little bit of like a flash vote for who we should put for our nominations to the league for our All Stars. So AB was our first nomination, being that he leads the league in blocks, and I think he's fifth overall on rebounds, if I remember correctly. So he's top five in multiple categories here throughout the league in stats. We put him as our first nominee, and we were looking to see who you guys wanted as our second nominee, and it was between Dylan, Lawan, and Chuck. Dylan wound up leading that vote, and he wound up being our second nomination. When you look at those numbers on the season, Dylan is a little bit more well-rounded when it comes down to the paper. Um, he had a little over 20 points, I think almost 7.5 assists, as well as seven or so rebounds per game. So solid numbers overall for him. Um, and like I said, he's missed a couple of games, so that's why maybe his overall numbers aren't. But if you do the per games, he's right up there with a lot of these other guys throughout the league when it comes to all around production. So I think we'll have a solid chance of having some of our guys featured on that All Star roster. Um, but I would say I'd be surprised if AB doesn't wind up making an all-star roster. I mean, he's a statistical category leader for the whole league, so I think he is going to be. If I had to bet, I would say he's going to be on there. But either way, these are going to be our numbers to beat for next season when it comes to the regular season for the Hoosier State Instigators. Um, we're gonna have to make like a little like page or something so we can keep our record keeping for our inaugural season and have a bunch of records to break for the next season. Um, but some of these are going to be pretty hard. That blocks, unless AB can break his own record, that's going to be very difficult. And the 3-point percentage as well as the 2-point percentage, I think, are both going to be very difficult to beat as well. I mean, over 50% on threes is very difficult, and to hit three-quarters of your 2-point shots, that's also very difficult, especially with over 100 shots taken on the season in both of those categories. That's going to be a difficult feat for our guys to beat next year, but I think they're definitely up to that task. Still plenty more to look forward to for the rest of this year, though. That was just a recap of our inaugural regular season. We've got on Sunday at 5. Again, it's going to be here on Patreon as well as our YouTube channel. Being that it's a scrimmage, we're going to stream it there for free as well. But then once we get to the playoffs, we'll go back to our Patreon here for the exclusive live game streams. But this Sunday at 5 p.m., we're going to have a scrimmage between two of our top players here. We have teams with players that the fans have drafted and assigned to the teams. It's going to be Team Dylan versus Team AB. Going to be a great matchup, as well as we have a little bit of a co-owner matchup. It's going to be head coach and player now, Frosty versus Spacely. And I think as far as the votes go currently, it looks like Frosty is going to be on Team Dylan with Spacely on Team AB. I know Spacely always comments about his height, so not sure if he's going to be able to pull off a dunk unless maybe he uses AB's height with his height to pull that off. But either way, it's going to be a fun matchup. Definitely some bragging rights on the line for not only the players but the owners when it comes to that matchup. Again, be on the lookout. I think we're going to have a couple of votes on the Control app in regards to that game, especially if you've been involved with fan controlled in the past, both Spacely and Frosty. Some big names in fan controlled, so um, a little bit of bragging rights as far as that goes as well. Between those guys, not only here on the Apex Athletic Collective and the Hoosier State Instigators, it's also going to be some bragging rights online for fan controlled fandom as well. But that's going to be an amazing game. Really looking forward to that. And after that, next week, we're going to be jumping into the playoffs. So, really excited for that. Again, we'll keep you updated when we get official word from the league, when we get the uh, word as far as who we're playing, when we're playing, where we're playing, all that. We'll always keep you updated with that. Hopefully, I'll be able to go out to those games. Um, but we're really looking forward to the playoffs. We've had a real strong stretch to end the season, and I think this game is going to help us, make sure our guys um, stay hot for the playoffs. And I think we've got a chance to make a pretty deep run. Looking forward to that. And I think that is pretty much it. That's all that I had scheduled for this week's show of Instigate Success. Next week we'll preview the matchup once we get that announced for our playoffs. Again, this is going to be the play-in rounds when we go to next week. The 9th and the 10th are the play-ins for our division. And I think we'll be having a busy weekend. And then if we're able to pull off victories in next weekend, then we'll continue going as far as we can throughout the circuit. And hopefully we can, including our playoff record, finish the season with a winning record. And I mean, if we could get champions, that'd be amazing as well. Again, I have said this before, and I'll keep my word. If we're able to make it to the championship, I will get the champion tattoo or champion text added to my Instigators tattoo. So a little bit of an extra incentive there. But again, I think that's all I had for this week. I'll give a little bit of a teaser though. I think not going to completely commit to it, but I think I'm going to have somebody that has been asking to do something with my hair. So maybe my hair will be a little bit different and I'll do a look for the playoffs. I'm not sure if it'll be a full-time look or if it'll just be a playoff look, but a little bit of a teaser. Next week, I think we'll have a playoff Jakey look. So kind of like playoff Jimmy, but we'll see if that brings good luck. But I think that's pretty much it. We'll be back here on Patreon and YouTube on Sunday at 5 for the scrimmage live stream. We'll be back on Instigate Success next week again, as always, at 9 p.m. Get you previewed for the playoffs and make sure we're all up to date when it comes to that. And then we'll be streaming for the playoffs next weekend. So a lot coming, a lot to look forward to. And if you haven't already made your votes, again, go to our Patreon, the Apex Athletic Collective, and get your votes in before the scrimmage here on Sunday. And then we'll also have some more votes following week as well. So until then, as always, be great and instigate.